Hello and welcome to this episode of Authentic Achievements, where I've got the absolute delight and privilege to be joined by a good friend, Simon Hartley. Simon is a globally respected sports psychology consultant and performance coach. With over 25 years experience, Simon's worked with gold medalists, world record holders, world champions, top 5 world ranked professional athletes, Olympians and championship winning teams. Since 2011, Simon's published 10 books, including Stronger Together, How Great Teams Work and Hire Great People. And during the last 20 years, Simon's applied the principles of sports psychology to business, education, healthcare, and the charity sector, which has included projects with some of the world's leading corporations. Pudding's excited that you're here, Simon, and foremost executives. He's also an award-winning international professional speaker, delivering keynotes throughout the world. And I've had the privilege of hearing you speak, and I can tell to everybody watching, it is nothing short of insightful and impactful. So Simon, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, you know I always love our conversations, so I'm very much looking forward to this. I actually thought it might have been Dizzy that was barking in the background, so I'm very pleased to know that it's not just me that has that challenge.
Oh, I know. They seem to have it on timing, don't they? It's like the minute that you need them to just please be quiet, they try and save you from either the wind or the post. Please don't do that. So if we hear Dizzy, Pudding, I'm sure will want to say hello back. But thank you so much for coming along. And likewise, I always so enjoy our conversations and was so looking forward to being able to have this one with you today. So can you start by sharing with us, please, a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, lots of people ask me, how did you get into the field of sports psychology? Because it's not your mainstream profession, is it? It's quite niche. And the honest answer is it all started when I failed some exams. So in combination, I failed a flying aptitude test because I wanted to be a pilot as a kid. So I failed my flying aptitude test. I was told that of the 3 options that you have when you take an aptitude test, option 1 is if you're really great at coordination, you can become a pilot. If you're not that good at it, but you're not disastrous, you could sit in either the back seat or the side seat, so you could be a navigator or an observer. And if you're total garbage, you could be an air traffic controller. And that's what they offered me. And quite frankly, I thought, I just didn't envisage life staring at one of those, round screens where the little blips are on a radar screen. I just thought, I can't do that. So my aspirations to fly died at that point. And because they died, I also failed maths and physics at A level. Spectacularly failed them as well. I actually got an ungraded in maths, which is, there's A, B, C, D, E, and then ungraded for those who don't need a mark. And so I got an ungraded in maths and an E in physics. So I had to think again. And it took me sort of a summer to get over that punch in the solar plexus and figure out that it would be a good idea to study what I really enjoyed and what I was interested in, and maybe that could lead somewhere. So I went back to college and did sports studies A level in a year, decided that it worked for me. I came out, I got an A grade, went on to university, studied sports science, and I actually went into sports science expecting to come out as a physiologist or a biomechanist, and psychology just grabbed me. It just intrigued me. My lecturer at the time used to ask some very powerful questions like, so how does somebody's mind work when they're faced with X, Y, or Z? What actually goes on in their heads? If a footballer's taking a penalty kick in the World Cup final, what's actually going on in their head? And I thought, what a brilliant question. I have no idea, but I'd love to know. And that's really what took me down the path of sports psychology. So
I love that. And likewise, I think the just working out how the brain works is, as you know, we could talk about that for hours, couldn't we? Because I think that's fascinating. What I love about your story is sometimes life throws us a plot twist, doesn't it? We think we know where we're going, we know where we're heading. You're going to be a pilot and you can be a passenger. So you've kind of got to rethink. But actually that rethinking allowed you to take something that you're passionate about and turn that into your profession, which is such a great story, because so often when we are hit with the challenge, we think that actually that's just
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I mean, there are all sorts of different levels to the kinds of achievements we have in life and what we're proud of. So
Yes.
there are lots that, it sounds a bit cliche, but as a parent, I see what my kids achieve, and I feel a sense of pride that in some way I've had a small part to play in that. But within my profession, I guess there are two that are at very, very different ends of the spectrum. So there was an athlete I worked with many, many years ago, one of the first that I worked with, who, when we started off, was absolutely nowhere in the world, not even in the top four in the city of Newcastle. He was a swimmer, and he went on to become a double Olympian, a double Commonwealth champion. He was seventh fastest in history when he finished his career. And that journey over, it was probably about 7 years that we were working together, and the transformation that I saw him achieve was huge. In fact, one of the conversations that we had years afterwards really cemented probably why I do what I do. And he said he was proud of all his achievements in swimming, the gold medals and the records and all that sort of stuff, and representing Team GB. But he said he was proudest of who he had become through that journey, the person that he'd become, the characteristics that he'd developed. And I thought, well, that's actually why I do what I do. The medals are great for an athlete, but actually you're working with a person, a human being. And my purpose is to help them become the kind of person they want to be, and not just achieve what they want to achieve, but become the person that they're proud of. So that was one that really hit me. At a very different end of the spectrum, I had a conversation once with a junior athlete. And so I worked with the senior Olympic programs and some of the junior programs. She was, I think, 14 at the time. We were doing a sports psych session together, and she said to me that, well, she told me that she was considering taking her own life. And that put me in a very unique position. I hadn't been in that position before, never had one of those conversations, especially with somebody who was potentially as vulnerable as she was. So just to get her, and I needed to bring in a clinical psych. It was, outside of my area of expertise as a sports psychologist, but just helping her turn around and find a reason to live again was another thing that I can look back on and say, I can genuinely feel proud of that moment. So there were all sorts, and they were in all sorts of different guises. But I guess, my current view of success, my current definition of success is being proud of who I am, not what I do or what I've attained or achieved, but who I am. So I suppose ultimately my greatest pride is being able to look in the mirror and say, I like you.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I wrote something just last week that was like, success isn't about what we have, it's about the impact that we make. And I think that is about the who we are. And, as your achievements just were testament to it, it's the impact you had on helping people become who they're supposed to become. And for that young girl, being who you are allowed her to have a safe space to be able to share how she was feeling, because she chose you to tell that to. And that really is about who you are and how you show up in the world, isn't it? That people can feel that they can share something which really is them at their most vulnerable. And I can see why you're proud of that, because it is, we do have to be proud. We have to, I've always said, as a girl, I've yet to meet a girl that can put mascara on without looking in the mirror. If anyone has tips, please let me know, but I don't know how to do that. So I know every day I'm going to at least have to look at myself quite intently, and I need to ensure that I'm not appalled by what I see. And that's about who you are and how you've been with people, I think. And you're right, that really is a great measure of success. Is, was I kind? Was I honest? And did I leave them with a feeling of increase? And that is what I've seen you do in kind of when you're working, and in every conversation that we have and that I've seen you in. It's that making sure that people leave feeling the best version of themselves because you've given them your time.
Yeah, and honestly, I think many people don't even look for those things. So it's not that there's nothing that could give them that sense of pride, that the evidence is all around them, but they're not looking at it. Yeah. And So when we tap into that, when we actively look for that stuff, we start to see reasons why we really could be proud of ourselves. I mean, how many people genuinely ask themselves the question, are you kind? Are you generous? What impact do you have on the people around you? Is the world a better place for having you in it? Because I think, honestly, if most people ask those questions, they'd end up concluding that they are kind, they are thoughtful, they are generous. The world is actually a better place. The people around them appreciate the fact that they're in their life.
I love that. And it's true. We don't often ask those parts. Myself and Scarlett, we've got a little family mission statement, which is to live a life of passionate curiosity and to pass our thoughts, words, and deeds through the lenses of, is it kind, is it honest, and does it add value? And if it doesn't hit all three, don't do it.
Yeah.
But we had to do that very consciously. Before doing that, you didn't ask those questions, and that's when you get in those moments of doubt, isn't it? That say, maybe I make no impact. Maybe nobody would notice if I was here or I wasn't here. Not in a ego way, but in a just feeling like we make a difference, whatever that difference is. I think you're right. If we could get people to ask themselves that more regularly, we'd see an improvement in how confident people are feeling about themselves, because we do make an impact in people's lives, in everybody we meet, don't we? In the conversations that we have.
Yeah, and I think when I look at what those foundations for happiness are, being happy with yourself, I think, is one of the primary foundations. And it's very difficult to be happy with anything, whether it's a moment in time, whether it's an experience, if we're not genuinely happy with ourselves. And I looked at some research into this. There's a YouTube, I think it might be a TED talk even, and the essence of it essentially is that happiness comes from our relationships. And I thought, yes, I can see that absolutely. And if I look even further, the number one relationship we have in life is with ourselves. So if that relationship's not solid, it's difficult to create a foundation for happiness.
That's so true, because whether we like it or not, we are the one person guaranteed to be with us at birth and with us at death. You don't get to run away from yourself. That you're there for the long haul, aren't you? Have you got any tips that you could share with us about how do you find that path to happiness with yourself if you haven't got it currently? Yeah,
the realization I have come to is that there are three strands. I call them interwoven strands of rope. Three things that all feed each other, and one of them is knowing yourself, another is liking yourself, being proud of yourself, and the other one is being yourself. And it's very difficult to do any one without the other two. So if you're not being yourself, you can't ever know yourself, because you'll only ever know the actor, as it were, the character that you're trying to play. So you have to be yourself in order to know yourself. If you don't know yourself, how can you ever like yourself? Yeah. If you didn't like yourself, why would you want to be yourself? So
it's almost like the loop of infinity, isn't it? It has no start and no end.
That's it, absolutely. So we have to do these. I think for me, the start point was knowing myself, actually reflecting on who I am, in the full understanding that I am not perfect. I will not see perfection, and that's okay, because nobody ever is, and nobody ever has been. So if I'm happy with who I am, which includes all of the, sort of gnarly bits, and I can also almost like come to a point of comfort knowing that I can work on those bits, I can improve those bits. So years and years ago, I had a couple of moments where I looked at myself and I thought, I could be more generous. I could be more patient. I could be more tolerant. If I was more patient, tolerant, and generous, I would probably like myself more. So why don't I just work on those bits? And it simultaneously, a couple of things happen. You develop the characteristics, so you do start to like yourself more because you are more generous. But the double whammy benefit is you see yourself as a more generous person, as well as being more generous. So now when I look at the mirror, I see somebody who is more generous than they were. And it still doesn't mean I'm perfect. It still doesn't mean that I'm ultimately always generous in every situation. But but I know that I'm better than I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And I'm a bit more patient and a bit more tolerant as well. So, you know, that's how I've sort of worked on that happiness with myself.
I love that, because you've given yourself permission to acknowledge the imperfections, but then make choices to improve them. So you're not saying, oh, I'm just gonna, and we are all perfectly imperfect, but because our imperfection, I think, is our perfection. But we can then look at it and say, yeah, but I don't like that bit, so I'm going to make a choice to work on it, to improve it, to see if I can make it a little bit better. It might still not be great, but it'll be better than it was the day before. And yeah, I kind of see that so much with my little girl. Is, you know, she'll come back, and I think we teach people often to do things in absolutes. So she'll come back and she'll be like, oh, I'm not very good at colouring, mummy. And I go, oh, you're not, Livy. Well, let's have a look. Let's think about that. How good is your colouring today versus yesterday? And she went, well, it's better. I said, okay, and how much better is it? Was it yesterday than it was last month? And she went, a lot, mummy. And how about last year? And she went, oh my goodness. So we'll look at them. I said, how do you feel about colouring now? She goes, I'm quite good, mummy, aren't I? And I was like, you're getting better. That's all we can do, is keep trying. And we get to choose, I think, and you always demonstrate this so beautifully. We get to choose whether we're going to get stuck on the fact we can't do it yet, or we're going to work on how can I learn to do it, or to do it better, or to feel that kind of feeling of increase.
Yeah.
And that's the piece. Is there a lesson that you've gone through where it's helped you to kind of develop that desire to keep trying?
I suppose there's a whole series of them. The life experience has taught me that if you try anything that you've never done before, you're going to fail. You won't do it perfectly first time. That's okay. Nobody ever does. So if you can learn from it and go again, that's great. I've learned that this whole thing, life, is definitely a journey, not a destination. If we get too caught up in the little destinations, I think we end up feeling unfulfilled. It's kind of vacuous. Yeah. So if we invest in the journey bit and understand the journey, that's great. And then we start to realize that we could ask who we are, but equally we could realize that who we are now is just part of the journey to who we are becoming. So who am I becoming? I'm much happier outside of my comfort zone now than I have ever been, because I know that I'm not expecting myself to be perfect at something or do it right first time. I think I can understand where people's hang-ups come from around that. You know, if I think back to my days at school, there were right answers and wrong answers. You know, there was winning and losing, there was success and failure. The world loves these black and whites, don't they? The absolutes. Yeah. But the truth is, we all always operate somewhere in between. And if we understand that bit and embrace that bit, I think it does give us permission to learn as we go, to take on things that we've never done before, be comfortable outside of our comfort zone. I was reflecting this morning with a group that I was working with that I see two sides of the risk coin now. So there's a risk to doing something. Yes, absolutely. One of the risks is you could fail. How big a risk that is part of perception. You know, maybe it isn't that big a risk after all, failing. But there's a risk either side. There's a risk of doing it, yes, and it might go wrong. There's equally a risk of not doing it. And that risk of not doing it is that you never get out of your comfort zone. You never try new things. You never explore your potential. You never push yourself. That's a risk. You could just stay stuck. That's a risk too. There's a whole gamut of experiences in life that you'll never experience if you don't get outside the comfort zone. That's the risk. And so if you understand there's a risk to doing something and not doing something, then you might find that the risk of not doing it is greater than doing it, giving it a go, and maybe screwing up, tripping over, whatever.
I love that. It's so true. There is always a risk of not doing as much as there is a risk of doing, or a cost of not doing as much as there is a cost of doing. But we don't always look at that, because we get ourselves stuck on the one we've seen, rather than having a view to go, well, we live in a world of polarity, so the equal and opposite will also be true. So if there's a risk of this, there's the opposite risk that if we do nothing. So it's really about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah, making it more normal to be outside of our comfort zone. I mean, before we started this, you were talking about having a flying lesson, or one that you recommended to your brother. I started learning to fly 18 months ago, and obviously I wanted to do it as a kid. Didn't. So a few years ago, I thought, that sounds fun though. I mean, I may not have done it professionally, but I'd still love to learn to fly. And my wife bought me a trial flying lesson for my birthday. I did it. I loved it. At the time, I said to her, this will be the most expensive present you've ever bought for me, because I've now got the bug and off I go. So I'm sort of 18 months in now, and everything that I've done so far has been outside of my comfort zone. There's not been a single thing that I've done learning to fly which has been comfortable, familiar, normal. And that's part of the attraction.
Oh, I love that. I'll be honest, I've only ever done it once. Somebody bought it me for a birthday many years ago, and so I feel the everything out of your comfort zone. I remember when they said, you can land it, and I was like, no, I can't. I feel like, yes, you can, but obviously they're there with you. But it was the most exhilarating and the most nerve-wracking and scary, because when you think about that fear, the fear that it will go horribly wrong, it's very great, isn't it? Simon, I could literally chat to you all day, but I am very conscious of time. Could you've already shared so much with us, but if you could go back and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
The one piece of advice that I think is more valuable than any other is take your own advice. Because there's so much wisdom that spills out of everybody's mouth. If we just took our own advice and did what we've advised other people to do, we would be amazing.
I love that. That is so true. The amount of times I find myself telling clients something and in the back of my head going, good advice, Kim. You might want to take that. But we don't, do we? We don't share that. Simon, it's been a joy as always. We'll have to get you back because I know we've only scratched the surface. I will make sure that obviously all the details of how people can get in touch with you are in the notes below. But if people do want to reach out, what's the best way?
Probably through LinkedIn, I would imagine. Yeah, drop me a LinkedIn connection. That'd be great.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Simon, so very much. Those details of how to get in touch with Simon and his LinkedIn will be in the notes below, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining us.